We're up.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys!
Hey.
We're
How are you?
we're waiting for some people to sign on. We're doing what they call live.
Oh, Suhaidi's here.
Hey, Suhaidi!
Hey,
All right,
Suhaidi.
Suhaidi. Welcome. Anybody else? See anybody else?
Is Gabby back there?
Hey!
Hey,
How are you
guys.
seeing all this?
Hello.
Miss Cherie and Miss Leslie are on.
Howdy.
Hello.
We're not pros at this, so here we go.
Hola, Pepe.
Hey, Pepe.
Hey, Leslie.
Hi, Miss Cherie, Miss Leslie.
Hey.
Rod family,
Hey,
hello.
Hector, you're on here. I never see you on Facebook.
You're like wondering.
Connie,
Nicole. Hi,
Give-
Connie.
Give Ashton a big hug for us. Huge hug. Well, we're going to do something different as we're waiting for people to sign on. Those of you who are already on, will you do me a favor? Will you text someone and say, join me on Facebook Live? You can catch us on BCF's Facebook page, Aftershock's Facebook page, and the BCF YouTube. Now, a cool thing is you can get to most of those by going to the BCF website, and that's bcflife.org. So we're anxious to spend some time with you. So invite a friend to join us. Is it possible? Oh, the comments are coming up, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, I need thicker glasses.
We're definitely gonna. We got a screen in front of us, guys, that we're trying. All us people are, and it doesn't help if you're young. Apparently, you still can't see them. So we're gonna be looking at our. Every once in a while, you're gonna see us looking down because we're gonna be looking at that. At this. Xavier's here. Welcome.
Hello,
Hey.
Cynthia on YouTube.
Marcy, we see you, girl.
We see you.
Davin's here.
Who?
Davin.
Davin. Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
And hi, Sky, Nora. Yay.
We're actually going to do some live singing tonight. So we're going to be your band. So that those of us who don't have such great voices like us, we're just going to mumble and grumble in the background, and hopefully they're going to drown this out. Hey, Rosie, you got to come over here too.
You're hiding.
Rosie's hiding behind the
Is that right?
camera.
I really was.
I think so.
They want to see you. They want to see you.
I'm going. For some reason.
There we go. Out the way when the walls are closing in. When I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. It was another in the fire, standing next to me. It was another in the water, holding back the sea. Should I ever need reminding, I've been set free. There's a cross that bears the curtain, another time for me. There's another in the fire. Oh, there's another in the fire. Oh, on my dead life beneath the water. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. Yes, Lord. Should I fall into space between everything to be and this reckoning? Not a way I won't bow to the things of this world. Yeah.
Yes, Lord.
'Cause I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the sea. And should I ever need reminding what power set me free, there is a grave that holds nobody, and the power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, there's another in the fire. Oh, there's another in the fire. Oh, there's another in the fire. Oh, and I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between resting. I can feel the ground shaking beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. Yeah.
Yes, Lord.
Oh. No other name but the name that is Jesus.
Yes, Lord.
He who was and still is and will be through it all. Let him hear you.
That's right.
Come one day in the space between all these things unseen and this reckoning. Yeah. 'Cause I know I will never be alone. That's right. 'Cause I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the water, holding back the sea. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I count the joy from every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Yeah. 'Cause I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between listen. I can hear the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. The fire standing next to me. Be another in the water,
Yes, Lord.
holding back the sea. Should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy of every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Count the joy of every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I count the joy of every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. One more time. I count the joy of every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
Yes, Lord.
Yeah.
Yes.
Woo, woo.
Yes.
Happy day, guys.
Yes. Woo. I wish you were all here.
Yeah.
I think I have to move my hand up a little. Let's swing this over. You get lost by my big body.
We can't delete any of this stuff. It's all stay forever.
Forever.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. Who else? We got any new people on?
We got B, we have
Hey,
Jazzy Thomas,
hey.
who else? Jazzy Thomas.
Jazzy and Thomas.
We have John and Nilda.
Hey, welcome,
Hello,
welcome.
Sally
Hi,
and
Sally.
Mark Tillman.
All All right.
Jessica Ortega.
It's great to have you guys. I think we got another song for you.
Yes.
One more.
I need to stop messing with social media. I have no idea what I'm doing. No clue. I would just stop.
Just sing.
Yeah, I'll
Just
just do
sing.
the musician.
You want to look the lyrics up? This one's "No Longer Slaves" by Shane and Shane, right? No
No,
Longer
I'm doing the one by Black Williams. I mean, the lyrics are the same.
Slaves. Okay, lyrics is
Yeah, lyrics are the same.
okay. You can look it up. No longer slaves. I'm no longer a slave to fear. Well, I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child of God. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child of God. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name. 'Cause I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. Yes, Lord. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear.
Child of God.
For I am a child of God.
Yes, Lord.
'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love.
Yes, Lord.
You rescue me so I can stand and say, I am a child of God.
Yeah. Yes, Lord.
You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. Yeah. You rescue me so I can stand and say, I am a child of God. Yeah. I am a child of God.
Yes, I am.
Yes, I am a child of God.
You are a child of God. Yes.
Man, I missed that.
Me too.
Right. Ay, ay, ay.
Oh, I'm gonna be crying. I wish we were all together.
So who else do we have? Anybody else new on?
We got Sophia Cortez.
Hey,
Hi, Sophia.
Jackie.
All right, Sophia. Woo.
Jackie Lopez.
Jackie.
Hey, Jackie.
Hello.
Gianna.
Hey,
Hi,
Gianna.
We have.
I wish your voices would come.
We hear you. Air hugs.
Yeah.
Megan Mata. We have
Megan.
Pastor Bo.
Hey, Megan.
If we have Megan Mata, we probably got the whole Mata Hey guys, love you.
Love you guys.
Well, we're going to be doing a new series, and this series we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to do it by bringing in each week a couple of, in order to be able to socially distance, we can't bring in all of our leaders, but we're going to bring in a different group every week, and you're going to get to connect again with your leaders from Aftershock, Middle School Ministry, and even you'll see some people from Fortress. So I'm glad you're here. Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at stories that Jesus told. We're going to get a picture of God through the stories that his son Jesus told. Those stories are called parables. And we're going to look at a new parable every week, and these guys have all come prepared. They read the parable that we're going to be talking about tonight. And if you guys want to follow us, this parable, it's actually found, and if you're watching us on your phone, you're going to need to get out your old-fashioned paper Bible. Get your paper Bible out. Woo! I love you version, but there's nothing like your paper Bible. I got mine right here. And it's falling apart. Time to get a new one. But if you want to follow us, it's found in Matthew chapter 25. It's verses 14 to 30. This is often called the parable of the talents. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through the parable of talents, and then we're going to each kind of share what we feel like God's placed on our heart. Maybe what God has been convicting each of us individually about. I know Maria told me when she came back from her quiet time this morning, she said, man, God spoke to me in a big way through that parable. And I know over the years, he's really spoken to me through this very parable. But here's what I want to tell you. As we're going through the parable, I'm going to put a little twist on it. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to present this parable as if it might be something that happened in the 21st century. As if it happened today. So it's not quite going to follow the words of Jesus, but it is going to be the same thought and idea that's found in this parable. So this is Pastor Rich's version of the parable of the talents. So I want to give you a little backstory on this particular parable that we're going to talk about tonight. It's happening after one of those really exhausting weeks for Jesus and his disciples. There were these extreme highs and extreme lows. How many of you guys have been there? You've experienced, while we've been in quarantine, you probably experienced times where like, this is amazing, and I can't stand it, I gotta get out, I need a hug, you know, I need a hug. That was the kind of week that Jesus and his disciples were going through. Extreme highs and extreme lows. There were times when Jesus was actually weeping, and there were times when they were rejoicing in their time together. So we find them now. Jesus said, you know what, guys, let's go. He grabs his disciples. We're going to get away from them. We're going to get up onto on the side of a mountain, and we're just going to relax a little bit. We're going to just chat. And as they're up on the side of this mountain, it's above the city of Jerusalem. So they're looking down at Jerusalem, and they can see it, and they talk about it, and the conversation starts to move in different directions. And I just picture, I'm an outdoor guy, so I can totally picture myself in this spot, laying down in the grass, hands behind my head, just looking up at the clouds, watching them float by. And as they're talking, their conversation kind of drifts, and they start talking about this idea of how God wants to use us and how God has gifted us to be used by him. And so I want to just, as they're talking about this particular conversation, Jesus decides to throw in a story. And this story is what we call a parable. And this parable, I picture it this way. So bear with me as I read through what I wrote about this particular parable. It's the last day of school. Half the seniors have skipped, and the rest of the students are bored spitless. After all, everyone knew who would pass and who would fail. Like, you guys that was another life, right? I don't even remember what school was like. We didn't have any end of, school just ended quickly without us even knowing it. But picture it as if it were an old day last year, okay, at the end of school. The last tests had been graded, The last pizza party was now nothing but empty cardboard boxes and a few unused packets of red pepper and some crumpled up napkins. For all intents and purposes, the year was over. And that's why it came as such a surprise when Principal Garza randomly walked into one of the sophomore classes and plunked himself down behind the teacher's desk and just stared at them, at each of the students. And it was like he was looking at them one by one. It's like, and everybody's thinking, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? It's the last day of school. What can he do to me? And it's unnerving. It's weird. It's weird because Principal Garza has a reputation. He was known as a hard-nosed disciplinarian. If you got caught out in the halls when you were supposed to be in class, you got a week's suspension. Hopefully none of you have been there. None of you have done that. And the first time you got caught smoking in the restrooms, man, you were off to back. He was tough. Really, really tough. So that's why it came as even a greater surprise when suddenly the principal jumps to his feet, pops open a big fat wallet, walks up to three of the students that he'd been staring at, and he starts to pass out hundreds. Would you like someone to do that to you? Pass out some $100 bills. Not ones, not fives, but $100 bills. The first kid, we're going to call him Sammy, with his bowler hat tilted to the side, his pants dragging down below his butt. You can all picture that guy, right, from school? He got 50 $100 bills. It was insane. $5,000 sitting there in his sweaty, shaking palms. Then Principal Garza turns to a young lady, we'll call her Beatriz, a tall brunette with two dimples that melded a guy's heart. He doles out 20 of those bad boys to her, $2,000. And she's about to faint. And finally, he turns to Lou. He's a short, skinny boy with the beginnings of a light hit-and-miss mustache, and he counts out 10 $100 bills, sets them in Louie's hands, and Louie just stands there, eyes wide open. He's in total shock. Principal Garza then steps back, and without any further words, he just says these simple things, and then he's gone. Take care of my money. I'll see you all in about 3 months. And he turns and walks out. Needless to say, the classroom, you can picture it, it becomes a madhouse. Was this some kind of test? Were the bills real? I can just picture them. They're pulling up looking for the watermark, are these real? Was this some sort of practical joke? Surely Principal Garza would be back and straighten everything up. But Principal Garza never returns. As Sammy, Beatriz, and Louie walked home that afternoon, clutching tightly to that wad of bills hid deep in their pockets, there's one thing they were all sure of. Principal Garza had said the money was his money. And that meant he would want it back someday. Sam, the craziest of the group, man, he went right to work. He had grand ideas. You see, Sam's dad was poor. He worked for minimum wage at a local auto body shop, and Sam helped him on the weekends. They were both good at what they did. In fact, Sam always said that his dad was worth a whole lot more than what his boss was. So before Sammy even opened the front door, he knew what he was going to do with that money. He was going to invest it in some new tools. And he was going to rent that beat-up warehouse down the street from their house. Sam was going to set up a little auto body shop that they could call their own. Beatriz, she had good ideas too. Although they didn't come as quickly as Sammy's, she was more of a thinker. She loved money. Anybody here? Or she loved numbers. Anybody here love numbers? Hey! One of us. Big numbers. Okay. Well, Beatriz loved numbers. And even though she was only 16 years old, she got a thrill from watching the stock market. She was on. It probably helped that her dad was a banker. And when he heard about Beatriz's cash, imagine, hear the first words that come out of his mouth. What do you think he would? Hey, woo! Invested. And that's exactly what she did, but with a twist. Beatriz invested in her little brother's lemonade stand. She invested in that geeky kid in school who wanted to fix computers during the summer. And she even started her very own babysitting business. Now, Louis, he was a thinker as well. He thought about PS3, girls, tacos, girls, skinny jeans, girls, the Cowboys, girls, flaming hot Cheetos, and did I mention girls? He also thought, this went through his mind, about how tough and how hard and how mean Principal Augusta could be. So Louis came up with a brilliant idea. As soon as he got home, he grabbed an old mayo jar, a shovel, and he walked into the backyard, and he stuffed those bills in the mayo jar, and he buried them right beside his dog's in the ground. Back to Sam. He spent the summer working hard, as did Beatrice. But Louis, he spent the summer as a couch potato. The summer ended quickly, and the three of them, Sammy, Beatrice, and Louis, soon found themselves sitting in the principal's office on the first day of 11th grade. Each had in their possession the principal's money. Louis had to run back home to dig his up. Thank God he ran into Beatrice on the way to school, or he would have completely forgotten. Sammy went first. He told his story. With watery eyes, Principal got excited. Then Sammy handed his principal the money. But instead of just $5,000, Sammy had $10,000. And that was after all the expenses were paid, including his dad's paycheck. Sammy was grinning from ear to ear. And so was Principal Garza. Principal Garza reached over and he hugged the young man. And he said, "Well done, Sammy. Because you've been faithful, I'm going to invest more in you. I'm going to put you and your dad in charge of a whole network of auto body shops throughout the whole Rio Grande Valley." Sammy was stunned. Yet Lisa's story was similar. She also doubled her money. And Principal Garza had praise for her as well. And not just that, he invested more money in her babysitting business. By now, Louis started to get a bit worried. Sitting there clutching that dirty mayo jar with the decaying money inside, he mumbled, I knew you were tough. I knew you were hard. I'm going to be honest, I'm afraid of you. I knew you would want your money back. So here it is. Every bill, you can count it. Principal Garza was visibly upset. He reached out and he took the jar from Louis' shaking hands. And then in a voice that commanded complete attention, Principal Garza spoke. "Are you kidding me, Louis? Are you kidding me, Louis? You lazy bum. At the very least, you could have taken that money down to First National Bank and invested it. Get out of my sight." Principal Garza looked at Louis' mayo jar. It still had those same 10 $100 bills. He emptied out Louis' jar and he gave the bills to Sam. Then, with a few more harsh words for Louis, Principal Garza ushered Louis out into the dark hallway where he would be mocked because of his laziness. Then he turned to the other two and with a wide grin said, "Let's celebrate. Let's celebrate." Now that's Pastor Rich's version of the parable of the talents. And I think the theology's right in there, although the setting's very different. As I think about Jesus sitting there with his buddies on the mountaintop, sharing this parable with them, I just imagine them thinking, "Man, that's harsh, Jesus. That's harsh. I mean, Louis didn't deserve that." The truth is, if you read this in the Bible, if you go there, if you've been reading along, kind of trying to check where I'm at with my story, you'll see that Jesus' version is a whole lot harsher than mine was. We got a couple questions for you. We're going to answer them ourselves here as well. I want you to think about this. Does the treatment seem unfair? You think about this one too. What gifts has God given all of us? God's given us all gifts. Some are unique, but some we all have in common. What are they? Then I want you to think about, you guys are watching, I want you to think about this. What particular gifts has He given you that are uniquely yours? Each one of you guys has a unique gift that God has given you to use for His honor and glory. What is that? And then the big question is, how are you using it? How are you using the things that God's given you? Think about it. If you're honest, which of the three people in this story do you relate to the most? What kind of excuses do you find yourself using to keep from doing everything that God has called you? And what do you think about God's idea of justice? Does it seem unfair? As you're thinking about that, I want to encourage you guys to comment. We'll keep an eye, try to keep an eye on the social media platforms. And if you have questions, we're going to attempt to answer them as well. So we're going to talk about it here among ourselves, kind of share what we felt, what hit us. But we also want to try to catch some of your feelings as well. So give us your thoughts, put them in the comments, and as you guys see them coming up, bring up, hey, Swady has a question, or Thomas has a question, somebody like that. Anybody? What do you think? Did that hit home? Did that feel unfair?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I think yeah. The first, when I was studying this and I was reading it and I just thought, I'm not a risk taker. I'm not. I like to play it safe. I want to make sure it's like, tell me the details. I don't just, go for it. And so I was thinking, oh, I probably, if that would happen to me, I don't know if I would have just got that money and invested it, because I would have just thought, invest it. First of all, I'm not I'm not good at stuff like that. That would have been my thought. And so I think I would have said, well, maybe I should just save it, and that way just give it all back to him, because I don't want him to come back and I'll just say, well, I don't have anything left, so I owe you. So that was, but the big word that stuck out for me that I don't think I've read this over and over, but I think on verse 25, what the first thing he says is, I was afraid. And I think that's what just it just kept ringing in my ears, because I think a lot of times for me anyway, fear keeps me from doing things. I have to make that conscious decision to say, God, I'm not going to allow fear. Fear doesn't come from you. So I can't let that keep me from doing what you've called me to do, whatever that looks like. But it's something that I have to continue to give over to God. So that just grabbed my attention. I circled it in my Bible, because I don't think I'd read it before, but I hadn't read that that was the first thing he said, I was afraid. So I don't know. What do you guys think? What did you guys write or comment?
I guess for me, because we chose these songs in this time,
Yeah.
and in that song, it's I'm no longer a slave to fear. I'm a child of God, and how you spoke about that, fear keeps me, and it keeps me sometimes. And it's like Louis, I'm like that. I play safe, and I'm just okay, this time, this is where you need it. Okay, I'm very how do you want it? How do you need it? I'm just okay, are you sure? I'm just like that. And
Yeah.
so I would have done the same, him, just so I wouldn't get in trouble with that guy.
Yeah. You're scared too.
I would have put it away too, because it's and you're honestly keeps me sometimes, and it's just it's hard, and I always have to give it to God. It's just okay, please, just let this kid go. So I really.
And I know Nikki saying, she said she likes the story, but she said that she'd probably be more like the one who hid it too. Yeah, the servant that hid the bag of silver.
I think it's easier to associate yourself or feel like the servant hit it if you're looking at the gift as money. because it's in money, in financial things, some of us are really not risk takers in that area. But what are some other things besides money what are some things that we all have that might be something that we might not be so easily fearful about using for gospel, or shouldn't be fearful?
What did you guys write? I think Nathan's gonna say something.
Yeah. What I got from it was in the story, the guy, the principal from your translation, he gives them the stuff, but when it gets to the guys who got more sober, the master, the principal's like, let's celebrate. And I view that as God wanting to celebrate our little victories here and there, like if you win over temptation, if you win over, anything that, is from the enemy, but it's when God wants to celebrate with you in the little things. And it also says that if we are faithful with a small amount, God will give us more responsibilities. And from that, I gather, as Christians, our biggest responsibility is to spread the word to those who don't know. So, like in later Matthew 6, for Jesus to go make disciples of all nations. So, our responsibility is to do that. So, figuring out, there's no other better responsibility than doing that. So, it's trying to figure out, instead of money, think of it as people. How am I able to reach more people, not invest in money, but invest myself into their lives?
That ultimately is the greatest call, the greatest gift He's given us, is to use everything we have to bring more people into His kingdom. Whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's our ability to sing, our ability to play music. God's given us all of these things for a single purpose. I think you hit it right on the head. It's to further the kingdom, to bring others into the kingdom. I thought it was interesting too that you mentioned this idea of Jesus celebrating with these people who have who've done well. It's interesting in the parable that the celebration actually happens. It's described in the real parable that Jesus speaks about. The celebration happens before Louis is thrown out into the dark hallway. In other words, before judgment. So that celebration happens while we're here on earth. That Louis being thrown out into the dark hallway is a symbol of judgment, death, and then being held accountable. We're all going to be judged by God. And so, but the kingdom of God, which this parable is about, begins from the time that Jesus started his ministry on earth and continues on through eternity. So there are rewards we get to celebrate while we're here on this earth. When we invest properly, we take the gifts that we've been given and use them for honor and glory. And I don't know about you guys, how do you feel when you do something for maybe the high school or middle school or Fortress students? What's that feel like when you invest in them and you do that?
Yeah.
It's an awesome
Right.
feeling.
Yeah. There's nothing better than it.
Yeah.
So, and we're missing that. Like, this is so awkward. We're missing investing in the people around us. It feels so good. That it's a celebration to be doing what God has called us to do. And it's easy to get distracted from that. And I think it's easy, even in this quarantine, to forget what our call is and how we're supposed to use everything we've been given. Thoughts?
Yes, I actually wanted to. I can't think of what it is because I haven't asked permission to say this. So if you're out there watching, person that messaged me on Instagram like this week, and be like, "It's me, Rosie's talking about me." But I had a student who texted me and said, "Hey, I'm writing an essay. Can you look over it?"
Yeah.
And the essay was talking about who that person was. And as I'm reading it, and my first thing is I went to school for teaching, so I'm like grammar. But as I look back and I was reading it, I go, this is a testimony. This is somebody writing their testimony on a piece of paper.
It's awesome.
And I thought, like, I would have never thought to do that, but that is that person's gift.
Yeah.
And that person, I've known that person since, I want to say middle school or their freshman year, and they just bring people to God. Like, people know them, and she'll tell me, she's like, oh, well, like, I'm guiding them like this, and I'm doing that, and she's an encourager.
Wow.
I don't think she knows it. So if you're out there listening, if not, I'm gonna text you on Instagram and be like, hey, why weren't you watching? And you're like, Rosie was talking about me. But I think it's cool how like you don't have to force it. Like just with your story, like
Yeah.
it was stuff that they were already doing that came so natural.
Right?
I think oftentimes we like to compare ourselves to people and like shout out to Aminda who does like all of the background techie stuff. Like I could never do
Yes.
that. Like if you threw me back there one Sunday, I can promise you that everything would just shut down. Blue screen and I would never return to PCS. But that's because God gives us specific talents.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we get so worried of, oh, I need to do what this person is doing and we tend to compare ourselves so much
Yeah.
to what we see other people do, what comes so naturally to them.
Yeah.
But I often tell a lot of people, because I know I'm super guilty of that, of comparing myself, and I have to remind myself of this. If God wanted 2 Savannahs, if God wanted 2 Hectors or 2 Oswaldos or 2 Buster, He would have created 2 of us, you know? And He didn't. So that means like Savannah's a beautiful voice. That's her gift.
Yeah.
Put me on a stage and you will all run out screaming. And you will say, Rosie, never do that again.
Yes.
You know? So I think it's funny how what we wouldn't consider a gift is what other people would think that's it.
Yes.
Really
Mark Tillman put time for him too. So
Time, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, Mark. Oh, it's from TikTok. I invited some people from TikTok.
Hey!
Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
He put time, so
Yeah,
we can totally relate to that too.
I think that's the big one. I think it's a big one for all. And I think in quarantine, time becomes even a bigger waster of our gifts. We just sit around and think we can't use that for God's honor and glory. I think it's cool for me to think that, I don't know, I there's this idea of, because we think that this parable is speaking mostly about money, there's the idea that the investment needs to have a return that's in money. So we see these people being given, $2,000 and coming back with $4,000, given $5,000 coming back with $10,000. And I believe, since we're looking at so many different things like time, like our talents and abilities as musicians or as speakers or as just huggers, if you may go to give someone a hug and they don't take it, and you feel like there's no return on that. No, that was something that God looked at and said, you doubled your money right there because you took the step and did what I wanted you to do. And so it may not give us the return that we think what the world will say is a return, but it's in our obedience that the return is doubled. When I do what God calls me to do, in His sight, I've doubled what He's given me. That encourages me. That encourages me even as a youth pastor. If I'm obedient to God's call in my life, and I'm doing what I sense Him calling me to do, even if I don't, the outcome isn't what I hoped it would be, I'm obedient in the act of doing it. He looks and says, "Good job." And that encourages me. That gives me hope.
And I think another thing we do that keeps us from using our gifts for God is making excuses for ourselves. So like, as a musician, I like playing all kinds of music, and right now during quarantine, worship music probably isn't the best. Like, personally, it's not some of the music I want to play because no one else is watching. So I use my own abilities for my own sense of entertainment. I use it to the benefit of myself and maybe, it's my little brothers who are just listening to me or my mom. But like, it's because we make those excuses throw in the back of our head, like, we can do it later after this quarantine. I'll make the big night of worship for the students, and it'll be fun, there'll be praise, there'll be worship, it'll feel great for myself. But at the time when I'm I'm by myself, I don't want to do that. So when I'm on stage and I have to stare at the music because I don't know it, it makes me feel bad, and that right there is the lack of like payment, I guess, like the God that right there, I'm missing out on God's gift. Like his, oh my gosh, I have no one to say. Like,
You're wasting your talent.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
And basically, you don't want to say that, but it sounds so harsh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Costa Rica. He said it for you.
I wrote it in the
It's true though.
It is, and we're all guilty of it. You know, every one of us. God's given us the ability to do something well, and it can be as simple as a hug, a shoulder to cry on. But if we don't make that available, then that's going to be something that God looks at us and says, "Hey, I gave you this ability. You didn't use it. Why? Give me an excuse." Do any new people watching us on there online?
We have Abby. Hi, Abby.
David Rivera, Marlon Gill,
Whoop, whoop.
welcome.
And Abigail,
come on, show us on.
Abby, you're on. I think too when I read this, I'm reminded that when God calls us to do something, like God's calling us, to give Him the best of our gifts or time or whatever that might be, and He says, on verse 29, it says, "To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance." And I think we forget that we're so spoiled. Like God's always like, do this because it's going to go well for you because I will give you an abundance and so is that He's asking us to do this because He knows it's going to be good for us. And so a lot of times we just don't want to because we're afraid or we might not do it well enough or we compare. But He's telling us, do it because I'm trusting you with this and I want to give you more. So that encouraged my heart too.
And I think that He gives us, while we're alive, He gives us more chances to use our gifts as we're obedient, as we use them. He gives us more. And then there's also that idea that when judgment comes, like that time when Louis thrown out into the dark hallway, that's going to come for each of us. We're going to stand in judgment. And then there's also, the Bible speaks clearly that there are gifts and rewards that are going to be given to us then as well. So we get double payback, if you will. We get it while we're walking on this earth, and we get it while we're living in heaven for the rest of our lives. You guys got any thoughts? Anything that you'd
Questions,
like us
guys?
to answer?
Questions. Did you want to say something? Celia, do you have a question?
Hi,
see
Celia. Buenos
And
días.
Gwen is on.
Abigail said hi.
Rosie Lopez. Yeah. Rose like, wait, what? Any question that you guys have?
I think maybe a question that they might have that I know I asked myself in high school.
Yeah.
Was like, how would you know what those things are? How would you find out? Like, I know, like nowadays, especially like us millennials, we're spoiled. We have like a BuzzFeed quiz for everything. Figure it out. Yeah. What Starbucks drink are you? Like, is there one?
What princess, Disney princess you want?
Yeah. So how can the high schoolers like kind of know, like, okay, well, I want to know how to use it. What do I do now? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
One more time. Going over my head.
Yeah. So like, if one of the high schoolers is like, okay, I want to use my gifts, but how do I know what are my gifts?
Oh.
Like, how would they go about it?
Well, I think there's some gifts we automatically all know we have, and I think the biggest one is someone over here is time. So just using that to do things that are obedient to God. That's the biggest gift. But then I think if you're struggling to know what your abilities are, then I think one of the best things to do is talk to your parents. They will see what you won't see. Mom would always tell me, I gotta say, shout out to my mom, she may be watching that, but she said, "Hey, why don't you ever talk about nice things that I do? I feel like all you say are the bad things I do." Let me give a shout out for my mom. Long before I saw it in myself, Mom saw in me that I love people and that I had a calling from God to share His love with others, and she encouraged that in me. And that was so huge for me. That was so huge. And I think that's a great way. Ask your parents. Ask the ones that know you. Ask people who have a relationship with Jesus Christ and know you well. And they'll point you to the kinds of gifts that God loves to see in his children. If I were to go up to your dad, Rosie, and say, "What's Rosie's gift?" What do you think he would say?
They'll say not clean.
But that's not a gift. No, we want a gift.
Don't invite me downtown and help me clean. Yeah, maybe not. But I think something they've always told me, or me and my mom, my dad and my mom used to tell me a lot was, you like people too much. They would always do it. And mom was always really protective, so she'd always be like, no te dejes, which means like, don't let them like,
Walk all over you.
yes, because I would do that. Like, I'd be like, oh, can I have $5? And I don't know if anybody goes to Hannibal, we'd walk to the panaderia, and you don't need $5 for the panaderia. You need like $1, $2 back then. And what I would do is I would take money and then I'd be like, oh, like my friend needs some, I'm gonna pay for her. And my mom caught on really, really quickly.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and she'd be like,
Every
why do
day.
you need $5? And I'd be like, well, because there was always people that didn't have any.
Right.
Or, maybe somebody wasn't feeling good that day. I'd be like, let's go to the panaderia that's like, I'll buy you some hot Cheetos with cheese, like $1.25. It's,
Right.
it's pocket change.
Yeah.
And so, like, even like as I got older and I got a job, she'd be like, cuídate. But towards the end, and even now, my dad, he goes, you love me. He likes to buy things. Yeah. It's the way I show that I care,
Yes. Yes. And you're right. It's usually, sorry, hon. It is usually what your gift is usually, so you'll find yourself doing it often for people. And then you realize, oh, I must really like to do that. Or somehow God takes you to that. And I'm thinking of this week, we were driving and automatically, like, I was at a stop and I turned and I noticed that right next to us, the man was kind of like, he had his head down. And I'm like, oh, I think his car stopped. Honey, you need to. I'm like, go help the man. She was happy to do, but
My gift is making me see it.
go help him. That's your gift. No, actually, I thought about, because I often had car problems and was left stranded all over the place. I really appreciate it when people stop and help me. And so now, if I see that anywhere, I'm like, oh, we should stop and help them. I know once a lady, I stopped to help her, and she's like, are you a mechanic? And I'm like, no, I'm just gonna help you push your car. I have no idea what I'm doing. But when you go through stuff where you've been there, that kind of takes your heart and makes it sensitive to certain things. So
Yeah, very often your gifting lines up, is closely attached to some of the pain that you may be going through in your past. And God's saying, I want to use you to help others in the same way that you were hurt. I want you to point them to something better.
anything.
Well, just my mom and my sisters, hello.
And that's what you were saying.
Hey, he's there.
Oh, we have a
Is
question.
camp happening? There we go.
Oh, that's what we're wondering.
Oh, man. Did Pastor Kenny mention something like that in the message?
So you mentioned something, I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you explain.
We'll have to get back to you once we know all the
Well,
details.
what we do know so far, in fact, this week I did, this is way off the subject.
Squirrel!
Yeah.
Okay, we'll answer it though, it's a good question. Camp Eagle has closed camp for all camps throughout 2020. And many of the camp places are doing that, they're closing camp. So we may have to come up with something creative. Camp Zephyr has closed camp also till the end of July. So basically, and then they're going to reevaluate after that. So most of the camps are saying, campgrounds are saying they're not going to do camp. So even if we wanted to do camp, we couldn't. But as of now, it looks like camp isn't going to happen. So if you have some creative ideas on something we could do, and this was heartbreaking news. Last week when Pastor Kenny mentioned it in his sermon, and I listened to the sermon ahead of time, in my notes, because we all listen to the sermon ahead of time and give him some thoughts, I wrote the word bummer. So I heard with you guys, I love camp. I did for camp too many times. And so we have, Brenda, if you have some creative ideas, we want to hear from you.
Let's pray that God would give us some crazy, fun, cool ideas, if you will. I was just gonna add when we're talking about when we go through things, and I think of that often too, like with you guys. I love to be with you all. I love to talk with you, and because of the pain that I went through with losing mom, even though at the moment I didn't understand it and it hurt so much, and I was like, it just doesn't make sense. Why? But now I'm able to see it, and I'm able to that pain maybe has given me compassion and mercy and love when you guys are hurting. And so I know that it might not be time or something else, but even just the love that you guys have from your pain, from things that you've gone through in your life. So,
I think another big and simple thing you can do, and I was just having this conversation this week with my mom, is I think the biggest way you can show love to someone is just by listening. I think that's like the biggest thing that I have. I don't talk much. Yeah. Like right now, I'm so awkward and I can't even look at you guys because it's so super weird.
you can't see them.
Exactly. I know they're there. I know they're
I love it. I wish I could just like.
We're looking at a screen of us talking. Very awkward.
Yeah. But anyway, the biggest thing is listen. Listen to somebody. I think that's what I do all the time. Even with you guys, it's hard for me to open up. I prefer to just sit and listen. And especially with my grandparents, especially with someone older than me, because you don't know what kind of wisdom they have. You have so much wisdom that you can, even if you don't live through it, you can turn around and use someone else and ask you. You don't have, a very good matching on dating, or you don't know, you're not really good at one particular thing. You can ask someone older than you, or just sit and listen to you their life, and you can somehow, some way, God will put someone in your path in a way that you're using them through you for God. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But,
That's deep.
yeah. That's just listen.
Yeah.
Stop talking sometimes. Just pay attention. Because in that listening, God will speak to you. Even if you're not waiting for it, God will reveal something to you that's like, crap, that's good.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's interesting because I never thought of listening that way. I thought of listening as a gift when you're a listener who shoulder you cry on. But active listening, where you're seeking someone's advice, listening to people who are older than you, that's a gift. I never even thought about that. Yeah, I wish I had that gift when I was a teenager.
It's crazy because we'll go into a store and all of a sudden there'll be like 2 or 3 people that will start talking to me and my mom's like, who was that? I have no clue. I have no idea what it is. I have no idea what it is. It can be older than me, it can be my age. It's like, I don't know who we are. We just start
But you stood it
I
and
just
listened.
it's really awkward. Like, yeah, it works.
I love that. What were you gonna say, Nick?
No, I was gonna say, I think listening, like Hector was saying, is very, like actively, like listening when someone, like, so shoulder to cry, like you were saying, is a very particular thing because you have to be there, you have to help them, even if you haven't gone through exactly what they're going through, you have to be there for them. You have to help be there and know that you understand what they're doing, even if you haven't gone through exactly that. You have that comfort that you can provide for them.
I think you have that gift.
I don't know.
Just saying. You do. You're very compassionate.
I think that's interesting. And as we think about all these things that could also be seen by the world as gifts, we also have to understand that as spiritual gifts. So we're saying listening is a gift, and in that listening to someone's pain, it's not just listening to their pain and being in a shoulder crowd, but it's also pointing them in a direction of hope. And that hope is Jesus. And if we can do that, then that is definitely taking what God has given us and turn it into something of eternal reminder, eternal energy.
Like for me, it's like kind of like how Hector put it, like listening to women that are older than me, like helps me understand like necessarily don't know what they're going through because they're older than me and they've experienced more, but it's like, oh, okay. And I can kind of relate it to what I'm going through, or something that's going in my life. And for me, like, how I try my best is like with the things that I've gone through, like to share that and like to speak that out because some people think it's like, oh well, I've gone through this, no one understands, like like, they're gonna judge me, they're gonna think this and that. And it's like no, I've gone through that too.
Yeah.
Like I've gone through what you've gone through, and it's hard, and I understand that there's Jesus, and he's always there, and just like speaking like what you've gone through, like really has helped me. Because people have done that for me over the time, and it's just like, oh, like they're going through something that's like that I'm going through, and I never would have thought, because there's like, and I don't like to bring up the TikTok, but I know some of them are watching it. But I mean, like, I've spoken it of this whole illusion of just like that we're perfect, and it's like there's no such thing. There's no such thing. We're not perfect. We all have flaws. We all have things that we go through that somebody else might go through, and just hearing that and how they got through that and got to Christ and got back with Christ and they've fallen. It's cool to hear those stories and those testimonies.
Right. Well, I just want to add that when you allowed us to see some of your, I didn't know TikTok. I'm like, is that a blog? Broncos TikTok. I don't know. But so Savannah allowed us to see some, and you're reaching a lot of people. So God is gifting you with a heart that's understanding and caring and just in fun. You present it, you do it in a way that's fun, and I love it. I was like, I really like this TikTok thing.
Any other thoughts, guys?
I think one of the biggest things, at least I know, to all my girls that are out there, I think in high school it's super scary to be vulnerable. I think that's what a lot of us are going back to, being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom would always tell me, lo que pasa en la casa, se queda en la casa. Whatever happens at home, stays at home. You go out, you put up a smile, and you make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that was a big, one, misconception that I had and that my mom had, but two, it was also a huge lie from the enemy.
Yeah.
And I think in high school we believe that we have to be perfect. Like I remember I was talking to somebody and I told them like my senior year, like I thought I had to have everything set in stone and know everything that I'm gonna do, and college had to be right, and I had to graduate at the age of 21, and then we have all these things that we tell ourselves that we have to do. And in reality, guys, newsflash, we're all making it up as we go along. Like, all everyone like, none of us know what's going on. But I think one of the biggest things that we can do is swallow our pride and say, you know what, like, I'm not perfect, like Savannah said. You know what, I'm broken. I remember one of the first things I ever owned up to when I became a leader was that, hi, I'm poor. Because people didn't think that. People would be like, oh, she has pretty decent clothes, she's not rich, but she's not poor.
Right.
But like, and some of y'all have been in my house, like I don't have AC, like for the longest time you had to like flip a switch to get hot water and then flip that.
Oh, girl. Yeah. Hold on. Can we leave?
This is my famous long-term penny.
So much for social
Oh, we can't cut that out. Oh, we can't. Sorry. And see, that's what happens because God is kicked with Oh my gosh. We can't delete that. Anyway, Rosie.
You were saying nothing. I know.
One of the things I had to admit was that I was, that I didn't come from a family of money. Even though mom would have liked to make it seem like that, even though dad would have liked to make it seem like that, we didn't. And I remember one day, I tell the story a lot, was I ran into one of the high school brothers. She was crying in that little room where the seniors used to meet a long time ago before they moved us over to the worship center. And she was crying. And I kind of just sat with her, and we weren't really super close back then. I was her leader, but we started talking, and she tells me, my house is being foreclosed. And I don't know what to do. And I I sat there and nobody had ever known in my entire life that that had happened to me when I was a sophomore. It was the same grade level as her, that my parents had to file bankruptcy because there were so many loans and there was so much debt. And one of the things was they were talking about selling, like giving our house back to the bank. And I was like, where are we going to go? We don't have anywhere. And I had to, go through that alone. And I remember sitting there going, I don't want her to know. But I told God, oh, you have. And so I did. And I told her about what happened with me. And we just cried and cried and cried. And to this day, that girl is one of my closest friends. I mean, she's graduated now, and I still reach out, we still talk. And I mean, we go to places and we're there for like 4 or 5 hours, and it's crazy how God has put our lives so parallel, and they're so similar. But had I been there and I'd been like, oh, she doesn't need to know that, and I would have been like, yes, yeah, oh yeah, cry. It wouldn't have meant the same.
You'd have been doing this.
Yes, I would have been doing that.
But you didn't. You took it out. You said, let me
invest.
invest. Very cool.
Oh, shout out to Savannah. I love you, Savannah. I love me. From Nora.
Oh, I love you.
Emily.
It's watching. Woo.
Oh,
Yes, we can play it.
Oh, well, there's this, I'm not sure the artist, but there's a song called, and it's one of my dad's favorites. And it's called Well Done. And the lyrics kind of go, well done, my beloved child. And like in the lyrics, it's just like talking about like when that day comes where, I get to see God, like to hear him say, well done, my beloved child, my faithful servant. And that song, it kind of brought it to me, like in my mind. It's just like, I guess like in a way, like, like in a way, like we need to like remember, like, have we done enough for his kingdom? Like, have we done everything that we could for him? And I know, like, sometimes I'm like, am I doing enough? And like, am I like still like, where are you taking me and stuff? And I know in this quarantine for me, it's just like, okay, like I have all these thoughts, I have all these ideas, but I can't really like fulfill. In my mind, I think I can't really fulfill them because like we're in quarantine, But it's just like, how can I fulfill them? And I always feel like quarantine, like that excuse, like kind of like back to like the excuses, just like how. So it's just like, I don't know. I kind of rambled on, but yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it is.
I think it's easy to get buried under that question too. Have I done enough? And I don't think that would be the question that we should ask. It's, have I done my best? If I've done the best and it's only, and when I've done it well, then it may not be enough when I compare it to someone else's standards or what someone else has done, but I've done my best. With what I've given, and that brings me encouragement. I think we can oftentimes compare ourselves to each other's gifts. We can say, okay, I didn't do as well as this person. Even though we had the same gift, I didn't do as well as he did. I didn't do enough because he did more. And it's not that I did enough. It's did I do it? But did I do it? It's easy to get when I first read through that parable. I want to place myself in there somewhere. Okay, maybe I'm not the guy who doubled a huge amount of money. But I'm definitely not the guy who's going to be thrown out in the dark. So it must be somewhere in the middle and feeling like I'm better than the guy who's thrown out in the dark, and I'm not as good as the guy who doubled the big amount of money. Stop looking around you. Just be obedient to what I'm called you to do. Still use that. Powerful. Well, we're going to be doing this for the next couple of weeks. It's a little after 8 o'clock now, and we're going to close down. But we want to pray with you. I'm going to just ask us if one of the leaders be willing to pray with pray, and one of the leaders pray. You guys want to volunteer? I got to put you on the spot, okay? And just a thought. We're going to put up the modern day parable tomorrow on social media. So if you want to share with your friends and use it as a way to invite them to come hear a modern parable next week, go for it. Use it as a method to invite more people We miss you guys.
Gabrielle, it's good to see you, girl. Miss you.
I just want to say hi to my grandma. I saw her. She was like the first person that came up in here.
Hey.
And
Anybody see Julie Walter on there?
No, I haven't seen it.
Hi, Grammy.
Still watching tomorrow.
Yes.
I go first. God, thank you for giving us such a good day. God, the weather has been so good. God, thank you for allowing us, God, the time right now to be able to do this and connect with the students, even if it's across the screen. God, we're all looking at ourselves in the camera. God, I thank you for the opportunity that you've given us. God, I pray for this message. I pray that if God, even one student, I pray that they run with it, God, that they have a fire set in their heart from this, God. I pray that all the students, God, at least a little something from this, God, that they're able to share this with their friends and all those that they're texting and talking to them, just community, God, that they can spread it, that God, a revival can even come from this thing that our young people. I pray that we're all able to, after hearing this message, identify what our talents are, God, our skills, our languages that we're able to love people with, our abilities that God has given us. I pray that we're able to find those groupings and to the best of our ability that you allow us to come. I pray that it's in Jesus' name.
Lord, tonight we surrender those things in our lives that keep us from obeying you, that keep us from doing what you've called us to do. Whether it's fear or pridefulness or worrying or jealousy or competition, feeling inadequate. God, we just bring it all before you and we want to exchange it for truth. We pray that you would give us the courage and the boldness and the desire to do what you've called us to do, whatever that looks like, knowing, Father, that your plans are plans of good for us, plans of good and not of evil, plans to give us a future, plans of hope. I pray, Father, for each person that's just listening tonight, for each one of us, I pray that you would continue to equip us with all that we need to finish this race well, that you would help us to keep our eyes focused on you, not to the left, not to the right, don't let us get sidetracked, but looking at you, Father, may your hand of blessing and favor and protection be upon us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Guys, we love you. Remember that you have a calling, and God wants to use you to do something amazing that only you can do well, and you're going to enjoy it. You're going to get rewarded here on earth and in heaven. We love you guys.
Love you guys.
Air hug.
Hug.
Love you.
Are we still on?
One more.
Oh my God.